The room was too quiet. That kind of sterile, HR silence that feels like it's been Febrezed over broken dreams and non-disclosure agreements. Karen from HR was already seated, her posture as stiff as her beige cardigan, hands folded over a manila folder like it contained nuclear codes. Across the table, the head of legal squinted at me like I was already halfway out the door. And then came the line, delivered with the breathy self-importance of someone who practiced it in the mirror that morning. We've received credible reports that you've been meeting with competitors. I blinked once. No gasp, no denial, no scrambling to explain my lunch receipts. I didn't even lean forward in my chair, just sat there and let the silence stretch. A slow death for the amateur dramatics they were trying to stage. Through the glass wall, I caught him watching Nate, the new VP of strategy, arms folded like he'd just checkmated a grandmaster. His tie too skinny, his jaw too clenched. Harvard MBA and all the emotional depth of a wet napkin. I could practically hear his internal monologue, got her, out with the old. Karen cleared her throat. Do you have anything to say in response? I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give a waiter who brings the wrong order 3 times in a row. No, they didn't expect that. HR thrives on reactions. Denials, tears, bargaining. Something they can document, route through compliance, justify in a footnote. But I gave them nothing. Just calm, collected silence. They took my badge. Security would escort me out, they said, like I was some kind of flight risk with a flash drive full of nuclear secrets. Fine by me. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and walked past Nate without a single glance. His smirk faltered, just a flicker, but it was enough, you know. Most people panic in that moment. They beg for a second chance. Cry about their kids, start talking about tenure and legacy and how they've given their life to the company. Not me. I just walked out like I was leaving a dentist appointment. Unbothered, because Nate, he wasn't firing a liability. He was lighting a match next to a very long fuse, and I'd been stacking the dynamite myself. By the way, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and toss a like. Seriously, it keeps our little revenge machine running and lets us keep delivering these sweet, slow burn takedowns. Back to the story. The elevator ride down was almost cinematic. Each ding a countdown: lobby, parking, garage, sunlight on steel. 15 years of blood, grit, and strategic wins vanished with a single HR memo written by someone who still signs emails with warmly. But I wasn't mourning. Not even close. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't rant to friends. I didn't call my husband or text my therapist. I opened my phone, scrolled to a contact saved under a fake name, and made a 2-word call, "It's time." The line went dead after that. No Roger, no dramatic pause, just click. Nate thought he'd ended my career. What he didn't know was that while he was busy playing Office Emperor, I'd been quietly building an empire of my own. Now that he'd drawn first blood, it was open season. By the time I hit the interstate, the news had already spread like someone let loose a fart in an open-plan office, unpleasant, undeniable, and traveling at Mach speed. Patricia's gone. 3 words that bounced off Slack threads, break room whispers, and passive-aggressive texts faster than Nate could reapply his overpriced hair gel. My inbox, disabled. My calendar, wiped. It was like I'd never existed, except the silence I left behind had weight, and everyone could feel it. The junior staff were the first to start speculating. Fresh-faced analysts I'd mentored were huddled by the coffee machine, tossing around theories like amateur detectives. Did she quit? Was it that NDA thing from Q2? She's too smart to get fired, right? Meanwhile, Nate was already doing a victory lap in the strategy wing, strutting down the hall with his usual smugness turned up to 11. I heard from an old friend in UX that he told the team she was probably fishing for a better offer. No loyalty anymore. Cute. Real cute, coming from a guy who once suggested we cut cybersecurity spend because nobody really hacks logistics firms. HR, of course, did what HR does best, rolled out the generic offboarding script. A 2-paragraph exit email, no mention of my contributions, no thank you for over a decade of work. Just a vague Patricia Mayers will be pursuing new opportunities. Pursuing my ass? They made it sound like I slipped into early retirement to chase sea turtles in Costa Rica. What I was doing actually was deleting burner accounts and transferring encrypted archives, because when you're dealing with snakes, you never leave your skin behind. The severance? Standard. Nothing special. 14 pages of legal fluff meant to pacify and silence. I signed it. No red lines. No rebuttal. Let Nate think he'd won. Let the board think I'd gone gentle into that good night. Meanwhile, I was already sketching out my next move on a diner napkin somewhere off Route 8, sipping bad coffee and watching a freight truck crawl past the window like it owed me money. You learn a lot in 15 years. How to read quarterly reports upside down during board meetings. How to spot a bad faith acquisition 2 quarters in advance. How to manage egos, silence saboteurs, and make a client feel like you're the only adult in the room. But most of all, you learn how to disappear in plain sight while laying the groundwork for an earthquake. I didn't go home right away. Took the long route, windows down, air stale with August heat and engine fumes. My phone sat face up in the passenger seat. I stared at it until the sun hit the screen just right, making it glow like it knew what was coming. Then I tapped one contact. No name, just a symbol, locked with key. It's time, I said. That was it. No reply needed. They'd been waiting for this call for weeks, maybe months. All I had to do was walk out of that sterile HR room and leave the front door unlocked. Nate thought he shut me out. What he actually did was hand me the matchbook to a building I helped design when I now had full clearance to burn to the damn ground. Not out of rage, not out of vengeance, but out of principle. Because when someone decides your legacy just because you're not on TikTok and don't start every sentence with "as a thought leader," you show them what legacy really means. And trust me, it doesn't go quietly. 3 weeks before that HR ambush, I stood in conference room B, staring at a slide deck I'd spent 6 weekends perfecting, data validated, risk scored, projection modeled. My pitch, pivot strategy that would have kept us 5 steps ahead of Northcrest's next procurement cycle. Nate sat across from me, spinning a Montblanc pen like he'd actually read the material. He hadn't. I know this because his response after I finished presenting was 6 words and zero substance. Yeah, I don't think this scales. The room went quiet. Even Gail from Ops stopped chewing her ice. My eyes flicked to the CEO, then to legal. No one said a word. Just polite nods, some light throat clearing. Nate leaned back in his chair like a guy who just farted during a job interview and hoped confidence would cover the stench. No follow-up questions, no counterpoints, just dismissal. He waved a hand, said we'd circle back after next quarter. Meeting adjourned. My file was closed like it had personally insulted him. That was the moment. That flicker of silence right after his throwaway line. I knew I'd just been politically mugged in broad daylight. And he wasn't done. Over the next few days, calendar invites started vanishing. I noticed key project threads I used to lead were now in review. Northcrest Partners, our top client, the one I'd brought in during my second year, suddenly stopped including me on update calls. A client who once called me their strategic anchor now seemed to be funneling everything through Nate's team. At first, I chalked it up to restructuring, until I got a CC'd email that said, and I quote, "Let's keep the call between your team and ours to minimize legacy friction." Legacy. There it was again. Their favorite euphemism for "we think you're in the way." I didn't cry. I didn't barge into Nate's office demanding answers or storm into HR with a righteous fist of fury. No, what I did was what women like me have always done in corporate America when the knives come out smiling. We document. Quietly, completely. Every strategy draft, every proposal I'd submitted, every email chain with Northcrest, every voice memo from late-night calls, they all went into a secure archive. Not stolen, not scraped. Just preserved. My name was on most of the contracts anyway. I'd built the legal scaffolding for those deals with our attorneys back when Nate was still perfecting his executive presence on Instagram. I started locking down access, backed up client call notes to a private server, set alerts on data room activity tied to my credentials. It wasn't paranoia, it was preservation. Because when someone's clearing the path to toss you, the least you can do is leave them a few tripwires. Next came the outreach. I didn't cast a wide net. No resumes, no open-to-work banners on LinkedIn. Just a few surgical texts to people I trusted, former board members, clients who'd moved on, one friend from legal who once said, "If you ever go solo, I'm in." They remembered me. More importantly, they remembered the wins. People never forget who actually delivered results when it mattered. And under the radar, one name kept popping up, Amnera. A quiet, well-funded stealth operation poking around in logistics automation. No public face yet, but the people behind it, let's just say they weren't Nate's crowd. They didn't speak in buzzwords or care about Ivy League swagger. They cared about ideas that worked, and they remembered one proposal in particular, mine. The one Nate torched because it wasn't sexy enough. I had a decision to make. I could either die the way they wanted me to, obsolete, overwritten, relic from a previous era, or I could quietly draft the obituary for their whole damn system. I chose the second. But I didn't just want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to see, in high definition, what happened when the person you dismissed as too legacy turns out to be the architect of the future you're now begging to access. Every Thursday for the past 3 months, I had a standing yoga class blocked on my calendar at 5:30 p.m. Recurring event complete with a fake Outlook reminder and a carry-on bag stuffed with rolled leggings and a purple mat I hadn't unrolled in years. The bag stayed in the trunk. The meetings didn't involve deep breathing or incense. They involved glass walls, NDA-signed whiteboards, and some of the sharpest minds I'd worked with since Sable Tech still had a soul. Amnera wasn't some 2-bit startup throwing buzzwords at a wall. It was a surgical operation, clean and quiet, bankrolled by a handful of ex-Sable Tech board members who knew exactly where the rot had set in. Most had left during the transition, aka the Nate era, when glossy decks replaced substance and talent started fleeing like rats off a yacht on fire. They hadn't forgotten me. One even called me the last adult in the building. The irony? The core playbook I'd built for Sable Tech, the one Nate had belittled in front of the entire C-suite, had become Amnera's launchpad. Every metric I'd modeled, every client behavior trend I'd mapped, every logistical algorithm I'd fine-tuned, they ate it up. Not only did they not shoot it down, they scaled it. My discarded proposal had become their flagship strategy. I wasn't just advising. I was helping shape the spine of a company that would eat Sable Tech's market segment alive within 18 months. Quietly, efficiently, strategically, everything about it was legal. My NDA with Sable Tech had clear boundaries. I wasn't transferring proprietary tech, wasn't using client data, wasn't violating non-compete clauses. I was applying my brain to a different framework, one they didn't own, because they'd thrown it in the corporate garbage. The first time I walked into Amnera's satellite office, a minimalist space inside a converted loft downtown, there was no receptionist, no fake plant in the corner, no mission statement in Helvetica on the wall. Just a whiteboard with numbers that made my skin hum, a few laptops, and a quiet sense of purpose that felt more intoxicating than any corporate awards ceremony I'd ever been dragged to. At the center of it all was Ali. 47. Grew up in procurement, made his fortune selling a platform Sable Tech once passed on because the CEO didn't get the UI. He'd known me since my analyst days, back when I was eating leftover Costco cake in windowless break rooms and solving supply chain math puzzles in my head just to stay awake during budget meetings. He said 2 words when I arrived, about time. He didn't offer me a job. He offered me a seat, not as an employee, he said, as a builder. Amnera wasn't just backing me, they were betting on me. They'd filed their IP, built lean infrastructure, and opened private talks with 2 enterprise partners who were already sick of Sable Tech's hollow executive posturing. One of those partners? Northcrest. Oh, the symmetry. The same client Nate tried to steal out from under me was now quietly flirting with Amnera, drawn in not just by our tech but by my name. They didn't trust Nate. Never did. They just hadn't had an alternative, until now. And let me be clear, I wasn't just consulting for Amnera. My fingerprints were on the code base, the go-to-market strategy, the legal architecture, the clause that tied early adoption incentives to pilot success metrics. Yep, that was me. Every little move was a mirrored rebuttal to Sable Tech's arrogance. Their rejection had become my resurrection, and now that I was no longer shackled to their glass tower and their insecure boyking of a VP, I was free to sign the papers Elise slid across the table at our last meeting. Chief Strategy Officer, Amnera Corp. No applause, no welcome gift. Just a nod, a handshake, and the silence that follows when everyone in the room understands the war has already begun. But no one's bleeding yet, not publicly. That part comes later. For now, I was just a woman in a new office with an old score, and the kind of calm you only get when you've already mapped out 10 moves ahead. And the man who thought he discarded you hasn't even realized he just set the board on fire. Buried in the 10th appendix of a dusty R&D contract, one of those bloated, cross-referenced monstrosities written back when legal still spoke like they'd swallowed a law textbook, was a clause I hadn't touched in almost 6 years. I remembered it only because I'd helped write it, back when I had oversight authority over joint development initiatives and still believed corporate governance was a real thing, not just something they brought up when women asked for raises. Clause 37C.3, Ownership Reversion of Unutilized IP. It was the legal equivalent of a forgotten landmine. Written to protect innovation from internal sabotage. It triggered reversion of certain intellectual property rights if the company failed to commercialize or actively develop a proposal within a specified period, 18 months to be exact. That timeline had quietly lapsed 6 weeks before Nate tossed my proposal in the shredder. In other words, Sable Tech hadn't just ignored my strategy. Legally, they'd abandoned it, and that meant I could claim it. Not the files on their server, of course, not the slide deck they buried, but the framework, the architecture, the core intellectual bones of the system I'd built. Mine now, and completely free of encumbrance. Because the moment Nate dismissed it without counterproposal or R&D follow-up, the countdown had begun. The contract gave me rights not to the work as theirs, but as the originator of the concept under dormant innovation guidelines, a relic from a more cautious legal era, before Nate's brand of spreadsheet cockiness took over. He had no idea it existed. Of course he didn't. Nate read contracts the way toddlers read menus, look for the bold parts, skip the rest. I sent the clause to Amnera's counsel. Talia, a former IP litigator with a memory like a steel trap and zero tolerance for corporate bro code, called me within the hour. Please tell me this is real. It's real. Jesus, she said, already typing. Let's build. Over the next 9 days, crafted the kind of filing packet that doesn't just hold water, it sinks ships. Timelines, draft iterations, development logs, a sworn affidavit confirming authorship, screenshots of file metadata, and the piece de resistance, an email from Nate dated 16 months ago that read in full, "We're not moving forward with Patricia's framework. It's redundant. Redundant." That word was going to taste real nice in court. Talia worked with our compliance lead to pre-register our updated IP using the reversion clause as the foundational claim. It was aggressive, risky, but airtight. We weren't copying Sable Tech's work. We were reclaiming mine and improving it with new layers, new applications, and a new architecture that didn't include a single line of their code. If they wanted to fight, They'd have to admit they knew the clause existed and still let it lapse. But we weren't done. The more we peeled back the layers, the more we saw how lazy Sable Tech's legal hygiene had become. Half their third-party partnerships were sloppily documented. Their data protocols hadn't been updated in 3 quarters. And their cloud vendor? Let's just say they'd left a few digital fingerprints in places they shouldn't have. Nothing illegal. Yet. But dangerously close to overlap with a joint R&D program I'd flagged back when I still wore the badge. Drafted a second letter. Not a lawsuit, not yet, a warning shot. A cease and desist grounded in the IP clause but bolstered by data integrity concerns, unauthorized overlap with proprietary frameworks, and potential breach of development ethics. Subtle, strategic, lethal. It would arrive on their desk in less than 72 hours. By then, the dominoes would already be wobbling. Nate thought I walked away empty-handed. He didn't realize I left holding a grenade, with the pin still dangling from his email. It started with a missed call, then 2, then 7. Nate, scrambling from his glass-encased corner office, dialing the same Northcrest number over and over while pretending not to sweat through his custom-tailored dress shirt. But procurement didn't answer. Not once. And when procurement stops answering, you're already halfway to the gallows, you just haven't felt the noose yet. I didn't need confirmation. I knew the silence meant movement. Real movement. The kind of tectonic shifting that doesn't come from board meetings or budget reviews, but from quiet, well-placed phone calls behind closed doors. Whispers, really. The whisper network had woken up. See, what Nate and his PowerPoint mafia never understood was that influence doesn't live in Slack channels or org charts. It lives in loyalty. It lives in who answers your call after hours, who forwards the right memo at the right time, who remembers that you were the one who stayed until 2 a.m. in Q4 during the rollout nobody else wanted to touch. Northcrest's procurement lead, Cheryl, was one of those people. She and I once pulled an all-nighter in a snowed-in Cincinnati hotel lobby, finalizing a logistics pivot that saved both companies a multimillion-dollar embarrassment. She drank bourbon straight, swore like a sailor, and had a memory like a steel jaw trap. She hadn't said a word since my departure. But now I was hearing things. Northcrest reviewing all active vendor contracts. They paused the Q1 renewals. Somebody flagged data concerns on the Sable Tech side. Little phrases drifting across town like smoke. I didn't chase them. I just listened. One came from an old friend in compliance. Another from a third-party consultant I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Nobody said my name, but every whisper had the same undertone. Patricia's not done. Then came the message. A simple signal ping from an old Sable Tech engineer, Marcus. Quiet guy, brilliant, allergic to meetings, and worshipped clean code like it was a religion. Whatever you're doing, keep going. No emojis, no explanation, just that. That's when I knew this wasn't just a counterplay, it was a cascade. Nate had tried to gut the foundation without checking which bricks had my initials etched in the underside. Turns out a lot of them did. Back at Amnera, we weren't celebrating. We were too focused for that. He was setting up a private call with Northcrest's innovation team. Talia was tightening the final wording on the cease and desist. And I was finalizing a deck, not flashy, not loud, just precise, that would introduce our solution in measured, confident strokes. Not as an attack, not as a replacement, but as an evolution. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about relevance. Let Nate scramble. Let him book fake meetings and send panic-fueled Slack messages about realigning stakeholder expectations. None of it mattered now. The lights were still on at Sable Tech, but the current was flickering and he didn't know how to find the fuse box. What I'd built wasn't just an idea, it was a network, quiet, tested, loyal. And it was waking up, one whisper at a time. The first sign of panic came wrapped in a velvet threat. A letter from Sable Tech's HR department, signed by a name I barely recognized, some poor middle manager who probably drew the short straw after Nate's forehead veins started pulsing in the leadership sink. The email subject line was laughably stiff, formal notice of potential breach. Inside was a Frankenstein's monster of legalese and weak intimidation tactics, stapled together by someone clearly hoping I'd tremble at the sight of company letterhead. I didn't open it right away. I brewed coffee, took a shower, fed my dog, watered the cactus I named after Nate's emotional availability. Then I sat down, flipped the envelope over, and read it like I was scanning the horoscopes, mild curiosity with a pinch of pity. It opened with faux concern language. We have become aware of activity which may constitute a violation of your prior employment agreement may. Constitute, activity. Translation, we're guessing, and we're scared. They danced around the idea that I might be engaging in competitive strategy development, accused me, indirectly, of exploiting insider knowledge, and suggested, quite gently, that I cease and desist any further communication with Sable Tech partners. That last part actually made me laugh out loud. Not a giggle, a full, echoing laugh in my kitchen that made the dog look up mid-crunch. See, when a company sends you a preemptive slap on the wrist before anything's been filed, that's not confidence. That's the sound of a man like Nate realizing too late that his kingdom has termites and someone just handed the exterminator a map. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it to my lawyer. I didn't even archive it. I just let it sit there in my inbox like a deflated balloon after a party no one showed up to. Because they didn't know that while they were trying to scare me with suggestion and syntax, our team had already finished the real paperwork. Talia had every clause stitched tight. We had already walked through the delivery timeline with our courier. Our letter, was printed on heavy stock, sealed in a double envelope with certified tracking, and sitting in a locked case on its way to Sable Tech's legal department. It would arrive first thing in the morning. We timed it that way. 8:43 a.m. Sharp, right when the building's mailroom sorted inbound legal correspondence into executive packets. Right when Nate would be finishing his sugarless protein shake, smug in his assumption that the HR letter had done the trick. Right when the general counsel would open a cream-colored envelope and read a 12-page cease and desist packed tighter than a court filing, citing 3 distinct violations: unauthorized use of dormant IP, unlawful replication of proprietary architecture, and failure to observe contract reversion stipulations from an active R&D clause. It wasn't a threat. It was a shot across the bow, signed by me, Chief Strategy Officer, Amnera Corp. Let that title marinate in their Monday morning meeting. No noise followed my silence. No call from HR. No damage control email from Nate, just stillness. But underneath that stillness was a pressure. Building, gathering. The eye of the storm isn't when everything erupts. It's the moment just before, when the air gets heavy, the birds stop chirping, and everyone looks at each other like they know something's coming, but they don't know what. That's where we were. And I had just pulled the pin. Legal got it first. That cream envelope with the red seal, our little Trojan horse, landed on the general counsel's desk at 8:44 a.m., exactly as planned. Talia's tracking software pinged me with a soft notification, delivered, signed by Jay Reese. A junior associate, probably fresh out of law school, probably still clinging to the belief that corporate law was about balance and fairness. Poor kid. The moment the envelope opened, chaos ignited. Sable Tech's general counsel, Adam Lerner, an aging legal warhorse with a Harvard ring and a temper like a sunburned toddler, skimmed the opening paragraph and swore loud enough to startle his assistant. Within 20 minutes, the entire legal team was corralled into a glass conference room that had only ever been used for photo ops and merger celebrations. This time, the blinds were drawn. Nobody posed for a group shot. The letter was short on fluff and long on sharp edges. 12 pages, each one backed with exhibits, documentation, references, and enough legal teeth to tear through Sable Tech's executive shield like wet tissue. They'd underestimated how quiet power works. How silence isn't surrender, it's the sound of preparation. Item 1. Unauthorized use of legacy intellectual property. Our filing laid out a meticulous timeline showing that the strategic framework Sable Tech had hastily started implementing in Q1, under Nate's new Initiative X, was a thinly disguised resurrection of the same architecture I'd authored, pitched, and documented under the now-lapsed R&D clause. Talia included timestamps, email threads, even a metadata trail from when Nate's team accessed the archived deck we thought they'd buried. Item 2. Data extraction and scraping violations. Our forensic consultant traced multiple unauthorized pulls from Northcrest's analytics node, all routed through a third-party cloud partner tied to Sable Tech's infrastructure. They were sloppy. Desperate, maybe, trying to recreate what I'd built without understanding how it actually functioned. The irony, in trying to duplicate my strategy, they triggered every tripwire I'd warned about 2 years ago, warnings they dismissed as overly cautious. Item 3. Dormant clause breach, the linchpin. Clause 37C.3, raised from the legal grave, now weaponized with surgical precision. We detailed the timeline of abandonment, showed evidence of their failure to commercialize or advance development, included a notarized affidavit confirming the clause's intent, signed back when I was still head of strategic initiatives. Ironclad and damning. But it was the signature line that detonated the real explosion. Patricia Mayer's Chief Strategy Officer, Amnera Corp. They hadn't seen my name on company letterhead since my offboarding. Nate had made sure of that. He erased me from the hallway photo wall, removed my archive bio from the internet, even had someone delete the email alias pmayers@sabletech.com from the global directory like it carried a virus. Now it was back. Bigger, heavier, on the bottom of a legal document that could bury them. Reports started flying. Nate, who had shown up late that morning, grinning from a Peloton high, walked into legal's floor and came out pale. He didn't say a word, just disappeared into a meeting with the general counsel and the CTO, doors closed, voices raised. Elsewhere, Slack threads started popping like microwave popcorn. What's going on in legal? Anyone know why Nate looks like he saw a ghost? Heard Northcrest froze renewal talks. The comms team, caught completely off guard, fumbled with internal messaging. By noon, the VP of External Affairs had asked if any of it was a prank. By 1, the board was alerted. It wasn't a prank. It was a reckoning. No social posts, no press leaks, just one quiet letter that flipped their conference table over like a thunderclap. They thought I was done, folded, retired. just another PowerPoint casualty. But they forgot who built the rules they were breaking. And now, they were being forced to play the game by a woman they tried to erase. The bomb had dropped, and it had my name on it. The boardroom smelled like panic and leather, old school chairs, new school fear. The emergency meeting was called within an hour of legal's internal memo hitting inboxes like a tsunami. Words like exposure, breach, and imminent litigation risk were underlined, bolded, and fired off with enough velocity to trigger multiple high-importance email flags. Everyone was there. The CEO, the coup, legal trying not to sweat through their button-ups, and Nate sitting dead center, suit jacket still perfectly tailored, voice pitching higher by the minute. She's bluffing, he said for the fourth time. Patricia's just trying to scare us into a settlement. General counsel didn't even look up from his binder. She's not bluffing, Nate. Clause 37C.3 is enforceable. The development and activity is documented, and the IP drift, it's provable, but we've modernized the framework, it doesn't matter. We still used her baseline structure. You accessed archived material. You replicated components that were protected under dormant clause parameters. He snapped the binder shut. That's infringement. She owns the bones of what you're now calling Initiative X. Silence. And then came the kill shot from the CFO. Northcrest pulled $50 million, effective immediately. Procurement cut us loose pending investigation. Their GC cited, quote, strategic conflict of interest with former personnel. Nate's face drained like someone yanked the plug on his blood supply. That's not, they can't just, they did, the CFO said, sliding a printed email across the table. As of this morning, the room fell quiet again, except for the faint ping of someone's Outlook calendar reminding them they were now officially screwed. Nate, the CEO said slowly, voice low, steady, dangerous. Did you know about the clause? No, he snapped. Nobody did. It was buried, irrelevant, legacy language. Who approved the Initiative X replication? Legal asked. I did based on team recommendations. Which team? Nate hesitated. His poker face cracked. I mean, it evolved. We had internal workshops. Stop, that was the CEO again. Just stop. The projector behind them lit up, trying to connect to a call scheduled 5 minutes earlier, a video link. Legal had sent it as part of the meeting materials, flagged FYI. Now it was blinking to life. At first, just the AMRA logo. Then the screen filled. A sleek conference room. Northcrest's executive team. 3 faces familiar to the Sable tech board, all seated, calm, composed. And one more face in the center square. Mine, hair back, black blazer. No makeup dramatics, just sharp eyes and a neutral expression honed from years of dealing with fragile egos in expensive suits. Good morning, I said evenly, my voice echoing into the Sable tech boardroom like a ghost come to collect. Nate flinched. The color was gone from his face. He leaned back like the chair itself might snap. I believe you've received our documentation, I continued, speaking to the Northcrest team on the call. As discussed, our compliance and product teams are aligned on next steps. We're ready to move forward, said Cheryl from Northcrest. Exclusively. The word hung in the air like a guillotine. Exclusive, as in, not with Sable Tech. As requested, I said, we'll be reassigning all advisory support to Amnera effective immediately. Our legal transition documents are en route to council. You'll have the signed MSA by EOD. Northcrest nodded. Amnera's COO added a polite thank you. I didn't acknowledge Nate, not even a glance, until the very end. I looked straight into the camera, not smug yet, just enough of a smile to let him know I knew. He leaned forward, eyes wide, lips parting like he might try to interrupt the moment. I ended the call. No fanfare, no curtain drop, just one click and I was gone. In that silence, back in their boardroom, no one moved. No one spoke, not even Nate. They had fired me. And now every decision they made would answer to me. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.